When we try to trace the origin of modern India, our memory usually stops at 1947. The struggle for independence is the most visible layer, but as the modern skyline fades away, the timeline stretches back much further than the birth of a nation-state. Even the famous Indus Valley cities occupy only a small fraction of the story. To reach the actual beginning, we have to look back 500,000 years to the Narmada human fossil, the oldest evidence of our ancestors inhabiting the subcontinent. We find evidence of this long-term survival in places like Bhimbetka. These cave paintings weren't just art, they were the records of a society that maintained a continuous presence in these valleys for over 100,000 years. Jawaharlal Nehru described this as a continuous, relentless process, a civilization engaged in a perpetual search for its own identity, evolving across thousands of generations. This deep history reveals the core of the Indian story. It is a record of extreme human endurance, where the foundations of a culture were laid down long before the first city was ever built. By 3300 BCE, endurance transitioned into an urban master plan. Harappans developed the subcontinent's first brick-paved cities, organized around a strict geometric grid. Because we cannot read their script, they remain a mystery. We reconstruct their social order by reading the silence of these ruins. By 1500 BCE, these urban centers were fading, making way for the Vedic period, a shift that would define the region's cultural DNA. This new era moved away from the brick-and-mortar stability of the Harappans. The early Aryan groups were pastoral nomads, bringing a culture defined by movement and the seasonal rhythms of their herds. They brought the Sanskrit language and the philosophical structures of the Vedas, creating a spiritual and social framework that didn't rely on city walls to survive. This era represents the first great merger of the Indian identity, the moment where the physical infrastructure of the Harappans met the mobile, philosophical energy of the Vedic tribes. By 500 BCE, the region was a patchwork of 16 rival kingdoms called the Mahajanapadas. They were wealthy and sophisticated, but deeply divided. That internal competition was interrupted when Alexander the Great reached the Indus. The arrival of a world-class Macedonian army on the frontier proved that the fragmented system of small kingdoms could no longer protect the subcontinent. This threat catalyzed a political revolution. To counter foreign expansion, Chandragupta Maurya and the philosopher Kautilya established a centralized imperial administration, unifying the disparate kingdoms into the Mauryan Empire. This model of unity paved the way for the Gupta Empire's golden age. With internal peace secured, the region saw a surge in classical science and the construction of monumental rock-cut temples that transformed mountains into cathedrals of art. The pressure of a foreign invasion did not shatter the region. Instead, it forced the subcontinent to reorganize itself into its first continent-spanning superpower. During the medieval period, that same wealth acted as a beacon for new groups. Huns, Arabs, and Turks began a long, relentless series of migrations and military incursions into the northern plains. These movements led to the Delhi Sultanate, and later the Mughal Empire, firmly embedding Islamic political and legal structures into the Indian landscape. While the initial arrivals were often marked by conflict with native powers like the Rajputs or the Vijayanagara Empire, the long-term reality was one of constant interaction and mutual influence. We see the result of this great absorption in the Taj Mahal. It is a monument using Persian geometry and Islamic forms, yet built with Indian materials and techniques to create something belonging exclusively to the subcontinent. Rather than erasing what came before, these new rulers were integrated into the landscape, adding another layer to a civilization that grows by incorporating every culture it encounters. In the 17th century, a different kind of outsider arrived. Unlike previous groups who settled and integrated, the European colonial powers functioned like a closed circuit. The British East India Company operated as an extractive entity. They weren't interested in a cultural merger. They were there to manage a system that funneled Indian wealth directly to London. By 1857, the friction of this one-way relationship exploded into a widespread rebellion. It was a turning point that ended the company's rule and placed India under the direct, rigid control of the British Crown. This unprecedented pressure forced a fractured society to organize. To reclaim their future, millions of people across different religions and languages began to see themselves as part of a single, modern national movement. This movement operated on multiple fronts. Mahatma Gandhi pioneered a nationwide campaign of nonviolent resistance that challenged the moral and economic basis of British rule. Simultaneously, figures like Subhas Chandra Bose pursued a revolutionary military path, seeking to win independence through direct armed conflict. Independence finally arrived in 1947, but it was coupled with the trauma of partition. The same day the nation was born, it was physically divided, triggering one of the largest and most violent migrations in human history. Despite that trauma, the modern republic emerged. It wasn't just a new government, it was the rebirth of a civilization, finally reclaiming its sovereignty. When you look at India today, you aren't just seeing a 20th century democracy. You are seeing a 500,000-year-old demonstration of human persistence, a culture that survives by turning every challenge into a new layer of its own identity.